I am now delighted to introduce to you our keynote speaker, Dietrich Stroeh. Dietrich worked for MMWD for 20 years and was the general manager from 74 to 1980, and saw the district through the very critical years of the 1976-77 drought. Dietrich has much that is exciting that he'll want to tell you, but I learned a fun fact about him today. At the time, Dietrich was the youngest ever general manager in California, at the tender age of 37. So Dietrich, wherever you are.
Yeah, I was the youngest general manager. And I still am. But I'm not a general manager. Anyway, yeah, I actually got the position in 1973, late 73. I was an interim manager very early part of 73. But when I got that job, the board at that point in time felt very strong that they want to come up with a brand new water supply system of some sort. And if you remember, the vote of the people that said, we don't want any more water out of Sonoma County, so it has to be some sort of in-county source and or whatever you come up with. So I took 4 of my staff and we lodged ourselves over in a local motel for 4 days and nights, and came up with this total water resource management program, which was completely unheard of, not only around our area, but in the state of California or in the nation. Because part of that was water conservation, which all of my eastern water people said, you're crazy, we have commodity, we don't conserve it, we sell it. And we also had a wastewater reclamation program, we had more efficiency use of the lakes. So it was kind of a brand new whole program, plus we had an in-county water source, which turned out to be the Suluhuda Reservoir. That was a turning point for the water district at that point in time. A whole new attitude, a whole new paradigm shift of what was going on with the district. We weren't just continually building more reservoirs or that type of stuff. So it was quite a time. And with that, at the same time, we were able to negotiate a water contract with Sonoma County for the little short intertie between North Marin County Water District and ourselves, to get 4,300 acre-feet of water off peak water. That took me a year to do, and Marty Griffin was part of that, if you remember. So 2 of those things occurred. First, at the time, water from Sonoma was coming in, and then the new type of water program. What's interesting about all of this, it's all well and good. Everything was going fine. We were really on a great strides, moving ahead rather rapidly, and then wham. 1976-77 drought occurred. Put that in kind of perspective. It's kind of interesting to note the type of how much runoff was occurring in the reservoirs, and normally the amount of runoff into the reservoirs is about 30 billion gallons of water a year every winter. 1975-76, that winter, it was 12 billion gallons. And of course, we went into rationing, which was mandatory rationing type. You couldn't water this, you couldn't do that, and all this other stuff. Well, the board asked me in the winter of 76, 77, what's the chances of this thing repeating itself? And I kind of giggled like a young engineer does. It says, oh, it's less than 1% chance. It'll never happen. The year, that particular winter, we had 1 billion gallons of runoff. We had 12 billion gallons of water in the reservoirs going into the summer of 1977. So we were scrambling. First place, where are we going to get water? And man, I'll tell you, we came up with some of the craziest ideas you've ever heard of. One of them, what I loved, which was an iceberg. Bringing an iceberg up from South America, because that's where the currents go, that's the way you would do it. So anyway, we were talking about it with the board. Pamela Lloyd was there on the board, and we were talking about this whole issue of bringing this iceberg in. Somebody said, well, where would you put it? And I said, probably. That was a good question. And of course, being a smart guy, I said, in the smallest bay. Then I started giggling. I said, why are you giggling? I said, could you imagine the environmental impact report for this thing? Number one, and number two, 1,000 penguins jump off this sucker and land on Inverness. You know, think about it. I don't think they would have liked that in Inverness. Anyway, what they probably would make pecks of them all. But we had all kinds of ideas. We were talking about bringing water down from Washington in tankers, bringing rail cars with water, that type of stuff. And I was also running all around the state of California trying to find water, that somebody that would allow us to give us some water. I went of course, right away to Sonoma County, and they said, no, we're already in a problem. We don't want to give you any water. And this went on and on. Well, in the meantime, I'm talking to Ron Roby, who's the Director of Water Resources at the state under Jerry Brown. And he says, well, we got to do something. We got to do something. I says, yes, I know we got to do something. I know. But what can you do? So anyway, he calls a meeting together of a whole group of agencies, one being Metropolitan Water District, which is Southern California, and ourselves, San Francisco, Alameda, East Bay, the various other ones, Contra Costa, Bureau of Reclamation, whole group of heavy hitters were sitting in that room one morning at the Capitol, and we were working this thing out. And Metropolitan says, we'll release 250,000 acre-feet of water from or not take it for the Central and Northern California uses. By the way, most of that water went to Kern County. Anyway, what we needed was about 10,000 acre-feet of water, and I was happy. Boy, was I happy. But the funny part of that story is the person from Bureau of Reclamation said, I can't sign this memo of understanding. I don't have congressional authorization. And Roby didn't stop. He turned around, got on the phone, and got Jerry Brown on the phone, talking to this guy. He signed it. So we were off on our own, and now we had water in the Delta. How do we get it out of the Delta? And a week later, I had a meeting with East Bay, Alameda, Contra Costa, and San Francisco, and ourselves to come up with some idea of how to move that water instead of barging it from someplace in the Delta. And what happened was that somebody realized that the two systems between Alameda and East Bay were 20 feet apart. Alameda got their water out of the Delta so we could move that water through with a connection, and all of a sudden we had water at the other end of Richmond Bridge. Well, this was sometime in March, and then we had to build a pipeline across that bridge. I started buying pipe, I started buying couplings, I started buying pumps, I started doing everything, and the board went along with me. I guess they didn't have much choice, but we just went ahead and started doing this stuff. Well, it turns out we didn't have any money to build this thing. So what do you do now? So we're lucky that the president of the Board of Supervisors was Arnold Baptiste, and he was good friends with President Carter. So we got a meeting back in Washington with President Carter's people. We had Senator Cranston's people there, John Burton, who was in the House. Gary Giacomini was with us. Bill Filani was on the board of directors, president of the board, I think, at the time. Anyway, we're all back there. So President Carter's people was talking to, of course, Cranston's, and Cranston says, well, John Burton knows what this is all about. John Burton says, well, Gary Giacomini knows what this is all about. And typical of Gary Giacomini, says, Stroeh knows everything. And I'm sitting in the back of the room, this young dude that, with all these heavy hitters, and I gulped down my whatever, and so they looked at me and said, well, what are you talking about? I mean, you folks don't need any money. You've got all the money in the world just sitting in that county and taxes and rich people and all the rest of this stuff. And I says, wait a minute. Yeah, you're right about Marin County. But the whole Bay Area is in trouble. California is in trouble. And 24 western states are affected by this drought. It's on us. It's coming on us. It is on us. And they perked up then. And they looked at me. Looked at me and said, well, that's all. Well, maybe we can do something. How much money do you think we need to appropriate? And I didn't know. I just said $650 million. I don't know where I got that number. I have no idea. To this day, I don't know where I got that number. And they got all serious and pumped up and said, whoa, no way, that's way too much money. How about $350 million? Can you live with that? All we needed was 10 million. I didn't care what they did with the rest of it. I didn't care what they do with the rest of it. But, so that's how that whole thing got started, and that was on a Thursday. The House took that up as an amendment to, I think, a defense bill. I always thought that was funny. But anyway, a defense bill as an amendment or addition or whatever you call it, and passed it that on Thursday. It went to the Senate, was passed in the Senate on Friday, and Carter signed the legislation on Monday. I always look back on that and I'm thinking, God, we must spend money like that all the time, you know? How do we do that? So anyway, 3 weeks later, I get a call from somebody from Washington saying, I understand I'm going to be running this $350 million and I'm allocating it. I understand, and you know all about what I'm supposed to do with it. I says, yeah, well, I do know what we want to do with it, but I don't know about everybody else. So anyway, he came out to Oakland and we met in this huge office with one desk and 2 chairs. And started working out the agreement as far as how this thing was going to be allocated and what was going to happen. At that time, it was 20% grant and 80% loan at a 3% interest rate. So I started arguing with him. I says, I don't think that's right. I think it should be 50-50. So we're actually sitting there with this guy and negotiating, and it turned out to be 40-60. So I negotiated a whole different thing with this fellow. But that's what how the hookup, and we got the money, got going, and was building the pipeline. But not only that occurred, we also needed to develop a rationing program, which was state-of-the-art, you might call it. And it was an allocation program, which I call a more democratic one. You're allocated so much water a day per person, and you can use it any way you want. If you don't want to take a shower or water your roses, that's fine. If you want to do it the other way around, that works too. And we went through a whole census thing with individual homes, and they would tell us how many people are in the family. We would say, okay, your allocation is whatever it was, and they had to meet that allocation. At the time, water was costing about, for a consumer, about $1.29 per 100 cubic feet. We set up a penalty system by which if you went over your allocation, it went to $10 per 100 cubic feet. If you doubled your allocation or used double, it went to $50 a 100 cubic feet. And I always like to tell the story about what went on with some of the consumers. Most of you remember Sally Sanford, who used to be the, she was the mayor of Sausalito, but she owned the Valhalla restaurant. And she called me up one day. By the way, her attitude was about the district, including the board and myself and what have you, that we were in it for the money. There wasn't a drought, and we were all a bunch of crooks. So she came in with her attorney and sat there in front of me. If you ever met Sally, she was a very hard-bitten lady, but she was crying. Unbelievable. I didn't think she could ever cry, but she was crying. And she said, my bill, oh, it's horrible, 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 and well, I'm going to sue you and sue the district, what have you. And I said, Sally, your normal water usage is about your normal bill is about $250 every 2 months. You have a bill here of $2,500. What are you going to do about it? She says, I'm not going to do anything about it. I says, I don't have any choice. You have to. She looked at me and said, well, I don't know what to do. I said, I'll tell you what, you give me a check for $2,500, and I'll put it in my drawer behind my desk, and when we're over with all this, I will tear it up if you meet your allotment. She quit crying right away. Says, you do that? I says, I'll do that. And exactly what happened. She left her attorney, she gave me the check, sat in the desk, and I forgot all about the thing until later in the year when we were starting to come out of this whole thing. And of course, her attorney calls up, I got to meet with you, got to meet with you. So they remind me about the $2,500 check. And they came in, and she had met her allotment. She did. And so I turned around and took the check out of the drawer and tore it up. She couldn't believe it. Any bureaucrat would do something like that, and I did. But I asked her after we got through smiling and laughing with each other, I said, how did you meet your allotment? You have a successful restaurant. She says, well, paper plates. We don't serve water. and I shut the men's restroom. I said, you shut the men's restroom? Yeah, she says they can pee off the wharf. It's okay. You know, there's a lot of humor in this whole thing. You have to have humor or you don't get through it, or going through it. It was a very, very serious time. We did get through it. And if we hadn't gotten through it, and hadn't gotten the pipeline, and in the rationing type of program, we would have been out of water in June for 170,000 people. That's how serious it was. Now, a lot of people, it started raining in the next winter. A lot of people looked at me lately, or not lately, but in the past, have said, well, you didn't need the pipeline. It rained. Well, how did I know it was going to rain? Even though we wrote a book about the man who made it rain. By the way, that's in the back, and it has all this history in it. So I'll be signing that later if you give any of you want a copy of that book. But it was an interesting time, and you know, I look back on it constantly think about what went on, and all the players and all the people. There's a number of them in this room. There's a gentleman in this room I want to comment about, and that is when I talked to my staff about building that pipeline and having it operational in June. We started in March. All the engineers walked out but him. Ron Thyssen sitting back there. He says, well, I think we can do it, boss. And he took it on, and we did. So. Well, there's a lot of other heroes in this room. I mean, it took a lot of people, including the board itself. And I think they were more scared than I was. But we all got through it. Going forward, the district's, I think, in good hands and in good shape moving forward. You've got a whole new paradigm as far as how you approach water supply and that type of thing. But I contend, and I'll close with this, I contend that in 50 years, I will contend that in 50 years, the water supplies are going to be so short, so to speak, that there will be allocation programs. There'll be allocation of water per person per day. And that's the only way it can happen. The other thing that has to happen is interconnection between all the agencies in some fashion to be able to, the supplies to be able to move back and forth and work that way. Desal is going to become a factor. You like that, Jared, right? Jared and I argue about desal all the time. I said, you got the wrong spot. That's the only problem with it. Anyway, I think that's going to happen along the coast. Las Vegas is already looking at it, trying to put a pipeline all the way from the coast to Las Vegas. So anyway, I'm going to close now, and I'd like to thank all of you for listening. It was a great time. Again, later I'll got the book back there. If you want one, I'll sign it. Thank you.